What's up, duelists? Since I do upload a ton of Edison format, and that's kind of what I'm known for, I am Edison guy, apparently, people ask me all the time, what deck should I play as a beginner? I get this question more frequently than any other question. Now, normally I recommend just playing Quick Draw Dandy Warrior, but in today's video, I want to go over 3 decks that I think would go really well for a beginner. If you're new to the format, if you're new to the game even, I think these 3 decks are pretty straightforward. They're pretty fun. They have a lot of play to them. They have a high skill ceiling. You can get better at them, but the general game plan is pretty straightforward and easy to understand. So you can just focus on learning what your cards do, and you don't have to worry about like misplaying or game plan or anything like that. That's like super complex in some of the more complex decks that you see in maybe the RBET top 8s. The first deck I want to talk about is Frog Monarch. This is a list that kind of looks like an old school list. You got Triple Light and Darkness Dragon. You've got a bunch of tribute monsters. The way this deck works, if you're newer at the game, is you try to use Swap Frog or Substitute to get to Swap Frog to send Treeborn Frog to the graveyard. Now, this isn't the exact text from Treeborn Frog from Edison format. You're going to have to look up errata on edisonformat.com. The way Treeborn Frog works is it just comes back in the standby phase over and over again. You don't have, it's not once per turn, basically. So you can bring it back, enemy controller, sacrifice it, take something, bring it back again, etc., etc. The way the deck works is you try to get Treeborn Frog in the graveyard, and then every turn after that turn, you get a free tribute summon because Treeborn Frog will act as your tribute fodder. You have a lot of powerful tribute monsters, and that's just the plan of the deck. You use Treeborn Frog to sacrifice for bigger, stronger monsters, and you try to outclass your opponent with your bigger and stronger monsters. Now, of course, just talking about the deck list in theory is one thing, but for each of these decks, I've got a replay for you guys where the deck is executing its primary game plan. So in this replay, it's me versus Sulu. We, play rock, paper, scissors because that's how it works on Dueling Book. In real life, you would roll a dice. We go ahead and get to go first. We pass the turn. We have our Substitute, which will get us to our Swap Frog. We also have Soul Exchange. This is a spell card that lets you sacrifice one of your opponent's monsters in place of your own at the cost of your battle phase. We go ahead and summon Substitute after activating Soul Exchange. Now in Edison, there's turn player priority. You can activate your monster effects, your ignition monster effects, not ignition monster effects? Yeah, your ignition monster effects. Wait, is it ignition or is it trigger? Or is it activate? Is it? I don't know which one it is. I think it's ignition. I'm not really sure. You can activate the ones that are like, you can do this. Not like when this card is summoned. You don't activate those with priority. They just activate when you summon them. But Substitute, for example, you activate it with turn player priority. Sacrifice the opponent's monster because we used the spell card to make it sacrificable, etc. We go ahead and go through our whole deck, get our Treeborn Frogs in the graveyard. Substitute is not once per turn, so you can go ahead and go through your whole deck. This is the basic game plan of the deck. You get 1 Dupe Frog, and then you get Flip-Flop Frog. You kind of force them to waste cards on the Flip-Flop Frog. The next Substitute gets 2 Dupe Frogs, and then from there, they've wasted a bunch of cards, and you can just Tribute Monster them out of the game since all of your little frogs are out of the deck, and you have nothing but really good cards in your deck. From here, we set the Flip-Flop. They set a monster. They pass back to us. The way Flip-Flop works is you can flip them face down, etc. We bring back Treeborn, and this is the game plan of the deck. Every turn we get that Treeborn. Every turn we get a free +1. If you're a newer player to the game entirely, +1 means you just get a free card. When you have more cards than your opponent, you have more options, and you generally are in a better spot. If you have more cards than your opponent, it's never a bad thing to have more cards than your opponent. That's how I see it, unless your opponent's playing some fringe stuff, which you don't need to worry about as a new player. All right, Flip-Flop Frog activates, returns the card to the hand. They chain Icarus attack. This will make the Dupe Frog miss timing. Make sure you look up that ruling before you play the Frog deck. The way it works is basically if a card says when and then you can, it can miss timing if it's destroyed chain link 2 or higher or whatever. If the conditions are met, chain link 2 or higher. But it doesn't really matter because we have the second Substitute. They've wasted resources. We can attack them now. And then main phase 2, we can go into double Dupe Frog again. So this is kind of, again, the game plan of the deck. We have 7 cards. The opponent has 5. Next turn, we get +1 off Little Treeborn. We get +1 for our draw step. So we go to 9. The opponent goes to 6. And we just slowly outgrind them. Well, not 6. They go to 5 because that was their draw step. So we have 9 cards, and they have 5. We can now Soul Exchange their monster. We can Tribute Summon our big spider guy. He's pretty strong. Tribute their monster, pass the turn, same spell card we used earlier, and that's just the game plan, is you just summon big monsters using Treeborn Frog, and this is pretty much the story of this match. I'm going to let it play out and kind of narrate over it. If you want to skip to the next deck, if you're a newer player, go for it. If you want to watch the rest of this match, see how it plays out, be my guest. Treeborn Frog comes back. You get the idea. Tragodia flips, attacks the Sirocco. Here's another Icarus attack. But this is pretty good for us because it's a Chain Link 1 Icarus attack. So Dupe Frog can add back Frog. We get to add back that flip-flop. And now we have 8 cards, thanks to this little Treeborn coming back every turn. And our opponent has 4. So we've slowly grinded them down to nothing by just using that incremental advantage every single turn. Here comes Caius the Shadow Monarch. They use their graveyard power to sort of make a burst play, but this is totally fine. All of the cards in our hand will let us basically run over this game now. We have multiple ways to steal their monsters. We have multiple big monsters we can use to close out this game. Each one of these is going to get us card advantage and put the opponent to 0 cards. We go ahead and enemy control the Caius, sacrifice it for Thessalos, pitch for Swap Frog. After Thessalos hits a value, attack for 3,400. Now the opponent has 1 turn to basically make a play. Otherwise, we're going to hit them for 3,400 again next turn. They activate their value. They summon Armor Master. They attack over the Swap Frog. They set a monster, set a back row, pass. We pick up Light and Darkness Dragon. Now this is the top end card of the deck. This is a card that I think you might need to do some studying on to understand. The way this card works is once per chain during either player's turn, if either player uses a spell, trap card, or a monster effect is activated, you can negate that. Well, you have to negate that by making him lose 500 attack and defense. If he can't lose 500 attack or defense, he can't negate the card. So you get 4 negates with this guy because the first 4 negates will drop him down to 400 defense, and then he can no longer lose 500 attack and defense. Keep in mind it's once per chain. Keep in mind if he's removed from the field, can no longer lose that attack. He's no longer going to resolve and negate the card that he was chaining to. It is mandatory for this card to chain to a card. There's a lot of wacky rulings with it. And then when this card is destroyed, you target a monster in your graveyard, destroy all cards, and special summon that monster. Can't target himself because he cannot be special summoned, but you can special summon other monsters, basically. Yeah, so pretty solid card, and here it's going to be great for us because we take the Armor Master. Enemy Controller, you can see, basically is just another way to steal a monster. Sacrifice both our Treeborn and the Blackwing Armor Master, summon Light and Darkness, negate the Raikou. They set a card, they pass. We hit them for 23. You can also shut off your own Light and Darkness Dragon by repeatedly activating Treeborn Frog in the standby phase, if you need to for whatever reason. They activate a few more cards. Light and Darkness Dragon negates both of them. Here, again, we repeatedly activate Treeborn Frog, fully negate our Light and Darkness, summon the next one, attack over their monster, and they concede the game. So that's generally the game plan of the Frog Monarch deck. In the post-board games, when you're sideboarding, people are going to be posting up with a lot of ways to delete your Treeborn Frog. Now, Treeborn Frog can only activate when there's no spell and trap cards in play. So a lot of times, opponents are going to be siding out their 1 Heavy Storm, their 1 Space Typhoon, which means you can bring in your trap cards, and they'll be pretty safe. They'll be pretty all right. Also, you're going to want to have some extra tribute fodder in case they do manage to remove your Treeborn Frog. So you probably want to bring in Cyber Dragons in a lot of cases. So in this matchup, I do bring in my 2 Bottomless. I do bring in my 2 Cyber Dragons. That's basically how it goes. Opponent gets to go first. They have charge of the Light Brigade. They do get to mill their value. So their strategy's cooking already. They're going to set the Raikou. They're going to get another 3 mills because I'm going to go Swap Frog, send Treeborn attack. But our plan is online. We've got Treeborn Frog. Now, when you do bring in your trap cards, you have to be careful when you set them. Because if you do set them, you can shut off your own Gores. You can shut off your own Treeborn. You don't want to set them until you're okay enough to shut off your own Treeborn, basically. Until your position's fine. You don't want to shut off your own cards too early. Otherwise, you won't be able to beat like simple things. Or you won't be able to accrue that incremental advantage from Treeborn Frog in the early game, basically. You want to set your trap cards when you're securing your position for the last push, basically. So the opponent summons Krebins. They attack us for 1,200. We drop Gores. On our turn, we get back Treeborn. We're able to Ryza, target the Krebins, and this is just kind of how the deck works. Krebins goes to the top of the deck. We switch all the monsters. We attack for 12. We attack for 24, and we attack for 27. Now that our Gores has been activated, now that we've got an increment from Treeborn Frog, we can set all 3 of our trap cards. Our opponent, 99%, has sided out their Heavy Storm. They can't clear all 3 trap cards or play through this board of 3 scary monsters, well, 2 scary monsters and a 1,200 token plus 3 back row. So let's see what they can do. We set 3 back row. They summon Krebins. They brain control the Ryza, which puts them down to 900. And in response, we can use our Phoenix Wing Wind Blast to put the Krebins on top of the deck so they can't synchro with our Ryza. And then we win the game. that's how this deck is played. It's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty fun deck. All the cards have really sweet artwork. I would recommend this to a newer player, or a build similar to this to a newer player. Maybe not Light and Darkness Dragon, it's a little bit confusing, but I think this card is awesome, especially if you're a newer player and you want to summon a big dragon. I think it's a good way to go for this deck. This is a pretty standard build. I'll leave a link for this in the description below. I normally don't do this, but for newer players, hey, you know what? I'll leave a link to the deck. All right, the next deck I want to talk about for beginners is Blackwings. This is a pretty straightforward Blackwing deck. It doesn't have anything but Blackwing monsters in it, and Dark Arm Dragon, which is the best dark monster in the format. You play it in every deck that plays dark monsters pretty much. It is just a really powerful card, so you can't really justify cutting it for any reason. Yeah, this is a pretty standard deck in Edison format. It's one of the most popular decks. It's an aggro deck. You summon your monsters, you try to attack your opponent. You have a lot of cards that help you force damage. Bore the Spear can deal damage over defense position monsters. Normally you can't do that in Yu-Gi-Oh! Kalut, you can discard from your hand to increase your monster's attack to deal extra damage. Sirocco can increase your monster's attack to deal extra damage. And Blizzard can summon back monsters so you can make powerful synchro monsters that also deal extra damage. So it's just a very aggressive deck. It likes to attack. It likes to win by dealing 8,000 damage very, very quickly. In this match, I'll showcase some of the strengths of this deck. It gets to play Triple Icarus. This is a card that you need to know about if you're a newer player. It's only played really in Blackwings. It's not really a common trap card, but you do need to know about it in Blackwings, where you tribute a Winged Beast and you get to destroy any 2 cards on the field. This is one of the best trap cards in the format by a lot, honestly. So definitely something to know about, definitely something to practice with. In your sideboard, you get to play some powerful cards too, like Deck Devastation Virus, which can shut off entire strategies. This is a pretty straightforward list. Let's just get into the replay. I don't think there's too much to say other than summon Blackwing Monster, activate your Whirlwind, or summon Blackwing Monster, attack, basically. That's the game plan with this deck, is just attack, 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 attack. Put your opponent really low. Maybe use your Blizzies or your Dark Arm Dragon to close things out in the middle of the late game. All right, this match is up against Basti. We lose the die roll, which is unfortunate, but that's just going to happen. 50% of the time, that's going to happen. We have our best card, Black Whirlwind, and that's the game plan of this deck. It's just summon Blackwing Monster with a Black Whirlwind, get a search, and attack. So let's see if we can initiate that. Oh no, we actually... Wait, did we win the die roll? No, they went first and they just passed. Usually when someone goes first and just passed, they're probably playing the Frog deck that we just talked about, because you don't play a lot of trap cards, and you also maybe don't have a lot of normal summons if you missed on the Frog drop. Or they're telegraphing Gores, in which case, Black Whirlwind, summon Bora, search for Kalut. Kalut's the one that can discard to increase your monster's attack. We just go ahead and attack for 1700. I make a bit of an error here. I set Deep Prison instead of Icarus attack because they didn't have Gores. I think it's fine to set Deep Prison, assuming that they have something like, I don't know, Sirocco of their own that they want to attack here over my Bora. But I think in hindsight, it's probably better to set the Icarus attack and save the Deep Prison, because Deep Prison can deal with resolved threats a little bit easier than Icarus attack can. So if they Heavy Storm me, it's better to save the Deep Prison, I think. Here comes Heavy Storm. So yeah, I think it's a little bit better to save the Deep Prison in the case of Heavy Storm. Not relevant. The game is going as it's going. It may or may not cost me this game. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. We now have access to Solemn Judgment, which is a very powerful trap card. We attack. Opponent uses Threatening Roar, which means we cannot declare an attack this turn. I set all of my back row now because Heavy Storm is gone. On this moment, they sacrifice for Caius. Now we could let this resolve, but then we'd be taking 3,400 damage, which is huge, and we'd be losing our Bora, which kind of makes our Blizzard worse. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place here. We have to use Solemn Judgment to negate this Caius, and hope that they can't deal the last 4,000 damage somehow. Paying 4,000 damage on, well, paying 4,000 life points on Solemn Judgment never feels good. It never feels good. On our turn, we draw Icarus attack, which is pretty bad, making me kind of sad that I didn't save the Deep Prison. Again, if we had saved the Deep Prison, we didn't actually need to Solemn the Caius. We could have let it resolve, and then we could have Deep Prisoned it, and then maybe been okay. But yeah, no, we ended up needing to Solemn there. Here we summon Blizzard, and the reason we summon Blizzard is the opponent doesn't have their Frog. Now, they are playing the Turbo Frogs deck from the last Ribbit tournament, so I know this deck. I know that they have very light defense that isn't Wabaku or Threatening Roar. I'm going to attack for 3,000 damage. Next turn, if they miss again on a drop, or if they play something that can get Icarus attacked, we can win with Bora plus Kalut. Well, not Bora plus Kalut. We'd have to win with whatever synchro monster we make plus Kalut, basically. So we attack with both, deal 3,300 or 3,000. putting him to 3,300. Set the Icarus attack and pass. Now Treeborn Frog gets pitched to special summon Swap Frog. We have to negate this with Royal Oppression because any Monarch is just crushing. They go ahead and Brain Control. So they've drawn some powerful spell cards, Heavy Storm and Brain Control. Here we have to Icarus attack. We cannot let a Monarch resolve. We Icarus attack, sacrifice the Blizzard, targeting the Royal Oppression and the Icarus attack. And they have dropped to 2,500. So now our Bora plus our Kalut is lethal if they just don't have another play this turn. Unfortunately for us, they do have another play this turn. We picked up Blizzard. Now I could summon the Blizzard and attack, but I make a misplay and don't predict enemy controller. I predict that my opponent has another threatening Roar or Wabaku because they play a million of them. If I just summon my Blizzard here and attack with both, Kalut will be lethal. It'll turn them into 2 lethal threats. However, because of me not playing around enemy controller here and me holding my Blizzard, hoping to get more value out of it, greedily, I've lost the game. I didn't stick to the game plan of the deck, which is normal summon your monsters and attack. So this is what happens when you choose to deviate from the game plan. You lose, pretty much. Now here's Space Typhoon. They get their increment off of Treeborn Frog, and we're just going to get crushed by this Monarch. Monarch's going to return the Bora. Now we have a dead draw on top of our deck. We can get rid of this Ryza, but opponent now has the increment from the Treeborn every turn, so they're drawing 2 cards every turn instead of just 1, whereas we're just drawing 1 card every turn, and we're also at a lower life total, so a lot of things kill us here. Yugioh Guardian is going to be able to steal the Ryza, but we are dead to any Turbo Rocket, we're dead to any Caius, we're dead to any Lava Golem, which is a good amount of this player's deck. I think we're also dead to... Well, we're not just dead to enemy controller, but it's pretty bad. So they take 400, we get to take their Ryza, they bring back Treeborn, they summon Substitoad. This is also pretty bad for us. Because they got the increment from the Treeborn Frog, they can now set up a dupe lock, which we don't have an out for. So they just go for that. Send all their frogs from the deck to the grave, like we explained in the previous match. Set up the dupe lock, and now we don't have an out for it. I switch the Ryza to attack. This is to play around... I'm not even really sure. Play around them having... Oh yeah, Turbo Rocket. And then I have to set this bottomless, and I pass. They bring back Treeborn Frog. They are able to sacrifice both their monsters for Lava Golem, so they top decked not only a good Substitoad, but also a good Lava Golem. They're making full use of the increment from this Treeborn Frog. We have to bottomless this Lava Golem. We lose our entire board just to 1 Lava Golem to survive. Now he could do something like switch the 2 dupe frogs to attack, but he ends up not doing that. We have to normal summon Kalut to play around a couple of different things. We could have set Kalut. I think in hindsight it was probably better to set the Kalut, but yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's kind of a bad spot regardless. If he finds Turbo Rocket, he can synchro into a large number of things that gets over Kalut in defense position. So I think if he finds Turbo Rocket, we just lose anyway. We kind of have to... Alternatively, he could honestly just make Turbo Rocket Turbo Rocket guy, the synchro that you make with this guy, and then attack the set monster with the dupe frog and then pop it with the other guy and kill us that way too. So there's a million ways that this loses us, but they top that Creature Swap, which is hilarious because a lot of people like to meme that Creature Swap is a good card in my comment section, which is super funny. It says the room temperature Creature Swap enjoyer. Yeah, definitely lost that game to a couple of power spells and not playing my best, but you guys get the general idea of Blackwings, how it plays. If you guys want to skip ahead to the next deck because you're a newer player and this is too much for you, feel free to do that. If you don't want to do that, whatever, feel free to watch the rest of the match. Against this sort of deck, you got to side in all your aggressive stuff. In this hand, you can see the game plan is initiated. We have Black Whirlwind again. We summon Shura, we search Kalut the Moonshadow, and we have a kill next turn if he does nothing. On his turn, he goes ahead and pitches Special Swap Frog, sends Swap Frog, bounces Swap Frog, and passes a turn. And now we have a kill. Shura, summon, Whirlwind, search Kalut. This is now, I believe, 8,100 damage. Or, yeah, we special summon Bora. So that's 1,700, 3,500, 5,300, 1,400, 2,800. It's all a bajillion damage. It's basically 8,100. It's basically game. So we have double Kalut. He knows we have double Kalut. He has no stops for this, and that's just going to be that. Pretty much. We go to the next game. And this is why Blackwings is such a scary deck. It can kill you out of nowhere. If you don't have a trap card, if you don't have a defensive play, if you don't have a way to interact, there's a lot of 6-card hands that can just randomly deal 8,000 damage pretty easily. Now we sided in our Cyber Dragons. The Frog deck has has a lot of monsters with 2,000 defense, which our monsters can't really get over that easily. So I brought in my Cyber Dragons. Cyber Dragon is good in some hands, but in some hands it can clog with multiple copies of Sirocco. Opponent starts, they set monster, pass the turn. Here we've drawn multiple copies of Sirocco, so Sag. Here comes Special Summon Cyber Dragon, Normal Summon Shura. I elect to attack with the Shura first. Now we might be missing damage, but the upside is too high. If the set monster is Treeborn Frog, we're actually getting so much value here. Whereas if we just attack with the Cyber Dragon first, and it's a 2,000 defender, we are getting 1,800 damage, but we're missing out on the potential of activating Shura, which I am just going to go for because I'm a greedy son of a bitch. Regardless, it's Marshmallow, which neither of our monsters can kill, so kind of alright. We do have brain control to clear the Marshmallow if we have to. On their turn, they have Caius, which is pretty bad for us. We're going to take 9 million damage. They attack the Cyber Dragon. They deal us 300, so we are now at 5,700 against the burn deck, which is a pretty bad spot to be in. We pick up Book of Moon, which is good. It's an interactive piece. I brain control the Caius. I attack directly. Now, I attack here because I think it's the safest play. However, it's not maybe. It's not maybe. It's pretty bad into Mirror Force, but it plays the best around Torrential if they do have it, but I don't remember if the deck plays Torrential or not. I think I'm missing 100 damage by not making Stardust Dragon main phase 1, but I figured that this plays around Torrential, and I'll trade 100 damage for playing around Torrential, which I couldn't remember if it was in the list or not. You guys get the idea. Blizzy synchros off with Caius, makes Stardust, and we can set our back row, which is now protected by the Stardust. Pass turn. They don't have Treeborn Frog for the increment. They don't have Tribute Fodder. We don't have a great hand, and we don't have a great setup here, but it's going to be good enough to hold on for a few turns, at the very least. They set a monster. We find Compulsory. I attack it, and they let Dupe Frog die. Dupe Frog is going to search for Swap Frog, which will give them access to Treeborn, which will inevitably give them that increment. We go ahead and set Compulsory Evacuation Device and pass. They summon Swap Frog. I let this happen because that is their normal summon. No need to stop it here. They send Treeborn. They pass. We draw Black Whirlwind, which inevitably will be good for us. It's just a little scary because our life total is a little bit low. We could potentially lose to them stealing the Stardust Dragon and being able to summon a Monarch and killing us. So I can't really afford to go for Whirlwind summon Sirocco here by tributing my own Stardust Dragon for a couple of different reasons. Also, this deck, this Burn Frog deck, sides 3 copies of Sirocco themselves. One thing you should know about Blackwing Sirocco is that when it uses its pump effect, it counts all Blackwings in play, not just the ones on your side of the field. So it counts your opponent's Blackwings as well. If we summon Sirocco and the opponent summons their Sirocco, we risk quite a bit of damage that way, which is pretty bad since we are, like I said, kind of low against the burn deck. So I think we need to hold off on using Black Whirlwind. I think we just use Stardust to bait whatever they have, force whatever they have, and that's what's happening here. Stardust is going to activate, negating the Dust Tornado. We get a free +1. Stardust can come back in the end phase. We pass the turn. They go ahead and bring back Treeborn Frog with the increment. They go ahead and summon, or enemy controller try to take Stardust. However, we have Book of Moon to counter enemy controller. Enemy controller can only take face-up monsters. So we set our Stardust Dragon. They're able to bring back Treeborn. If they have a Monarch, this sucks for us, but what can you do? They go ahead and activate Swap Frog, normal summon Substitute, sacrifice their Treeborn Frog, etc., etc., etc. Go through their whole deck, grab Dupe Frog, bounce the Swap Frog, activate Substitute. And they make a little bit of a misplay here, activating Substitute, not realizing their second Dupe Frog's in the graveyard. They can't actually dupe lock us. So, yeah, they activate Substitute, go get Swap Frog, set back row, and pass. Now, we do pick up Kalut, which is okay. That means that's, I think we're like a couple hundred short from killing the opponent here. But, again, we need to force that back row before anything can happen. So we need to flip the Stardust and just attack the Dupe Frog. They do elect to use Wabaku so that they can bring back the Treeborn Frog next turn. They do protect their Dupe Frog this way. But that's totally okay for us. I'll trade clearing a Wabaku for them getting their Treeborn Frog back any day, because Wabaku is going to prevent our eventual game push. They go ahead and bring back that Treeborn. They summon Turbo Rocket. They synchro here into Yugioh Guardian. Now, this is a greedy play from them. I think if I was them, I would have gone Bryonic and priority bounced the Stardust Dragon. That way, they at least clear the Stardust Dragon, which is giving them such a headache. Yugioh Guardian's greedy because if I have any back row that interacts with Yugioh Guardian, they don't get to clear the Stardust, and they still have to stare down this guy, which is pretty bad for them because this guy's scary. So they go ahead and attack the Stardust Dragon. We compulsory the Yugioh. Goes back to the extra. They pass the turn. On our turn, we find Bottomless, which is pretty good. Now we have Whirlwind. Activate the Whirlwind off Kalut. I go for a bit of a greedy line here, which is grab Gale, special Gale, attack over the Treeborn with Gale, attack directly for 14, attack directly for 25. So I deal 3,900. I put them to 1,700, which means now Sirocco plus Whirlwind can get us to potentially a kill by searching Bora. Maybe. As long as they have a monster with 2,000 or less defense in play and they have no back row, the Sirocco will get us to a kill with Black Whirlwind. Here, main phase 2, we use our Gale's effect to have the Gores permanently. And then we synchro into Bryonic. Bryonic pitch one of our superfluous copies of Sirocco to bounce their token. Now we can't leave our Blackwing monsters in play, because like I said, if they have their own Sirocco, they can summon it, pump it up using our Blackwing monster stats, and then deal us a ton of damage or run over one of our monsters, just put us in a bad spot overall. Even though we do have Bottomless to interact with Sirocco, there's a chance that they have enemy controller to take Bryonic, and then they can bounce our Stardust Dragon, and then maybe clear our Bottomless and go from there. So we'll see. I set the Bottomless. They have one weak monster. They can't outgore our Bryonic or our Stardust. Like I said, I think they made a greedy play earlier going for the Yugioh. Had they added the Stardust, they would have been in a much better spot here. They go ahead and bring back the Treeborn, set a monster, pass the turn. We draw our third copy of Sirocco, but fortunately, they have a monster with less than 2,000 defense in play, so it's not going to matter for much longer that we bricked a little bit. We go ahead and summon that Bora. After searching it off Whirlwind, pump it up using Sirocco's effect, and then execute the game plan of the deck, which is attack and deal damage. And that's a close one. That was a close game. This is a fun matchup. I think Frogs versus Blackwings is really fun. If you're building two decks, the first deck that I showcased and the second deck that I showcased are good decks to play against each other. So, solid two decks to build. The last deck I want to show you guys is Lightsworn. Lightsworn is another, I think, roughly beginner-friendly deck. This deck, I think, has a little bit of a higher skill ceiling than the other two decks. Well, I don't know. Blackwings is really skill-intensive, but I think all these decks have a pretty high skill ceiling. I think Lightsworn has a bit of a higher skill floor. If you make a mistake with Lightsworn, it's much more punishing than if you make a mistake with Frogs or with Blackwings. So if you want to test your skill a little bit, maybe you've played the first two decks a bit as a beginner, and you want to play a deck that is a little bit more tricky to execute, this might be the deck for you. Now, the reason this deck's a little bit more tricky is you have a lot of cards that can potentially brick, so you have to be really smart about the cards that you do have that are live, and you have to make sure you get your engine going, otherwise this deck is just not going to function. The way this deck works is you send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard, you set up your graveyard with a bunch of different Lightsworn names, and then you get to play the powerful Judgment Dragon. This is the payoff for getting your Lightsworn monsters in the graveyard. This card can destroy all other cards on the field, and it gets to summon himself for free, and he's fucking huge, and he's broken as shit, and in the end phase he mills even more cards. Then there's other payoffs like playing the Wolf. Now the Wolf is a bad card in your hand because you can't summon it from your hand, but if you send it from your deck to the graveyard, you get a special summon it for free. So you can get free increment that way, similar to the Treeborn Frog, but it's much stronger, it's much more powerful, it's much more threatening. This is a very terrifying deck. It is a deck that I never like playing against because it can destroy you out of nowhere. And it also is a deck that's just incredibly fast, and yeah, it's just a strong deck. The sideboard stuff, you side Royal Decrees, which negates all trap cards because you yourself rarely play trap cards. And then you also get to play some powerful trap cards to bring in to counter your opponent's strategies, as well as Consecrated Light to deal with heavy dark monster decks like Blackwings. Okay, let's get into the match. This is a match against Dan M. I lose the die roll, which is pretty tough. Usually with Lightsworn, if you win the die roll, you're at a very big advantage because you get to mill before your opponent gets to play cards. Now the opponent gets to start off with Shura plus a set back row, so you guys get to see more Blackwings. Blackwings was the last deck. I think Blackwings does a very good job against Lightsworn in general. So I think building Lightsworn with Blackwings might be good if you have a friend, or if you yourself are more skilled than your friend, you can play the Lightsworn deck and try to see if you can hang with the pressure from the Blackwing deck. Basically, give yourself a handicap by playing the deck that has the worst matchup, more or less. Set Raikou. Opponent draws. They go ahead and attack with a bunch of monsters, deal us a bunch of damage. This is a card that is sometimes played in Blackwings, Dark Grapher. Now, in the list I showed, I elected not to show it off because I think it's definitely not as intuitive a card as something like just playing the pure list. They go ahead and attack with the Shura. I have to pop the Shura or else they can get another value from their deck, and I'm just going to get steamrolled in advantage. But we are going to take 4,000 damage. And our mills, pretty bad. That's one of the risks with Lightsworn too. Sometimes you're just going to mill spell cards, you're not going to hit names for your Judgment Dragon, and you're going to lose. Opponent sets 2 new back row, which is going to be really tough for us to beat, and then passes the turn. Now we have a strong hand, and we have the potential to play through at least Royal Oppression and clear and stabilize this board, but we can't play through 2 pieces of negation. Like, we can't play through Royal Oppression Solemn, we can't play through Starlight Road, Royal Oppression, we can only play through 1 piece of negation. So, let's see if they have 2. We charge a Light Brigade, we mill 2 unique names, so now we have 3 names. You need 4 for Judgment Dragon. We search for, I think, Gareth, yeah, because Gareth is the worst one. We're just going to pitch him to Solar Recharge. Draw 2 cards. Of course, we draw Wolf Foolish, which is very unfortunate. It's just very unfortunate because Wolf is a terrible draw. We do get a mill Necrogarna, which is nice, but alas, here we are. Special Summon Judgment Dragon. They have 1 piece of negation. We can now chain Mystical Space Typhoon from our hand because it's a quick play spell. Target the Royal Oppression, but they do have the 2nd piece of negation, and we go ahead and lose this game and go to the next one after they deprison our Jane, which is super unfortunate. Opponent says GG. I think that was a little bit of a luck sack on your part. No, I'm just kidding. I just don't like saying GG after game 1. If anyone ever says it to me after game 1, then I'm not going to say it. Unfortunately, part of the downside of Lightsworn is drawing Wolf. Wolf does nothing in your hands. And both games we have now drawn Wolf, which has done nothing in our hands. We draw Honest. We have no starter, which is really, really unfortunate. We're forced to just set Space Typhoon to maybe counter a Black Whirlwind and pass. Opponent summons Dark Grepher. They go for the same play here. Now, because we have a back row, they actually make a bit of an error here. Because we have a back row, they should attack with Armed Wing first. If they attack with Armed Wing first and we have Tragodia, then they get in more damage. If they attack with Dark Grepher first and they have Colute, then they can Colute over our Tragodia. But if they don't have Colute, they should attack with Armed Wing first because it's just more damage. They attack with Dark Grepher first, we're able to special summon Tragodia, and they're not able to get over the Tragodia because they don't have a Colute. They only set 1 back row, so we're able to end-phase Typhoon that and pretty much stabilize. Unfortunately, we draw a 2nd Wolf. So this is a really big downside of this deck, is that you just draw Wolf and Wolf doesn't do anything. Now we have a bunch of different plays here. We can use our Spider Guy to steal their Dark Grepher, but that's a liability because Shura can then run over that Dark Grepher. We can Foolish then Celestia, but then our Tragodia becomes weak. He becomes 1800 and he can't attack over something like Sirocco, basically. So I think the best play is to just Foolish Wolf, special summon out the Wolf, and attack both their monsters. We know they don't have Colute because they would have attacked over Tragodia with Colute last turn. So we know they don't have it. We attack Wolf over the Grepher, they take 400. We attack the Armed Wing, they take 100. Next turn, if they try to attack over our Wolf, we have Honest, and then we can sack that Wolf for Celestia. They go ahead and summon Blackwing Sirocco, they special summon Blackwing Gale. They have our Tragodia. Now the way this works is Tragodia is now permanently stuck at half of whatever he was at this time. So if I lose a card in my hands, he still stays at 1200, basically. Special summons out Colossal Fighter, Colossal attacks Wolf. This is a smart play from the opponent, playing around Honest. Colossal Fighter, if he dies by battle, he can bring himself back. So I use Honest to pump up my Wolf till the end of this turn. He takes a bunch of damage. Colossal Fighter brings itself back and can now attack over the Tragodia. So we do lose our Tragodia, which is kind of sad, but we have Celestia to deal with the Colossal Fighter, provided he doesn't have a negation, of course. If the opponent has any sort of negation, it's going to be very difficult for me to win this game. We draw Gores, which is yet another not so great draw here, but at least it'll stabilize in case he does have negation. We go for Celestia, and of course, they do have negation. We don't have the out. We used our Typhoon a little bit early on their single back row to make sure that our first push went through, and we are kind of stuck here. We mill 4, but yeah, this is just bad. This is super bad. They attack the Celestia. We lose our card, and the deck never really executed its game plan. We are going to end up losing this match because Light Mirror is too good for us to get over. None of our light monsters can deal with it, and we don't draw Heavy Storm to clear it. So yeah, we have to pass. We take a bunch of damage. We special summon Gores. We get a token. We go ahead and draw Judgment Dragon, which is live to be summoned? Question mark? No, it's not. We still need a 4th name, which is unlucky. So we just have to pass. Opponent is able to attack over our Gores. They pass the turn. We draw for turn. It's Lila. Now we could pitch the Lila, special summon the JD, but it's just like a defensive JD, which is not very good. So there's no real reason to do that. We just pass the turn, and they end up having Blizzard for the game. And unfortunately, our next draw was Brain Control, which would have won us the game on the spot had we drawn it, but alas, here it is, because their set card, as you can see, is Royal Oppression. That next top deck would have been the one for us. But you guys kind of get the idea of Lightsworn. It's a bit of a high roll deck in some ways. Sometimes you can draw some Wolves. Sometimes there's a lot of different lines. It's hard to know the best one. but I think it is ultimately a beginner-friendly deck because it is similar enough to summon, mill, set up for your Judgment Dragon, get back your Judgment Dragon with monster reincarnations, and then go from there. Uh, I think a newer player could play this pretty effectively. It's just, keep in mind how you use your resources if you're going to play this deck. In any case, I hope these 3 decks are helpful for you. I'm going to leave links for them in the description below. And if you guys want to join a Discord and practice with other players who are maybe better once you get some reps in with these decks, or like try them out in solo mode for a bit, join the Discords in the description below, the edisonformat.com Discord and the Really Big Yu-Gi-Oh Discord. That's where the communities happen. That's where the tournaments happen. And I'll see you guys in the next vid. Peace.